I don't typically listen to podcasts. They're not my thing. Shannon loves podcasts.
Is
but
Shannon
they're all
a
about like
steeper?
murder.
I don't know. Does she listen to us?
No,
Probably not.
you got to, unless you talk about murder. She does like.
We can try. So it was funny. So I went to my dentist, and the dentist was like, she's like, so how's everything going? And I was like, oh, and I'm doing bits. I'm at the dentist. Who gives a shit? I was like, a little bit of this, a little of that, and can't sleep. But what's new?
Yeah.
And she's like, do you want us to run a sleep study with you? And I was like,
The dentist?
the dentist. And I was like,
They doing your colonoscopy as well?
yeah.
Or?
So I didn't want to tell you this. So they did the colonoscopy, same tools as my mouth. Worst part though, they did my mouth second.
Yeah, I was gonna
She was like, yeah, we'll do that. And I was like, cool. They give me this ring, which, let me be clear, is not at all as lovely as the ring you're wearing. It is like a clunky. It looks like if it, like what a superhero ring would be if you needed to activate a power. It was just an enormous.
Was it like a Wi-Fi kind of ring or something?
It was a ring that was like rubber, by the way,
okay.
and it was like connected to my phone the whole time. It was I don't really understand what the situation was. Regardless, I wore it and I go into the dentist's office, and one of my favorite things ever is when people go good news, bad news, and then they're both just not great.
Yeah.
She's like, good news, bad news. I was like, hit me. And she goes, good news, the ring worked and gave us the stats we needed. And I was like, that's the good news?
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah. That has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, the good news is our technology, which we believe in, worked.
Yeah.
The bad news is your body cannot maintain more than 20 minutes of deep sleep at a time. And I was like, well, that sounds, what's the average? She goes, not 20 minutes. And I was like,
Did she tell you what the average was?
at one point, it was like hours.
Yeah. I think the average like deep sleep is usually like 1.5 to 3 hours of deep sleep. I usually get about 25 minutes. So
My God.
And I've tried so many different things. In fact, tea is one of the things. I got like sleepy time tea.
Does that work?
The one with the bear.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. By the way, that's as good a time as any to introduce the tea we're drinking.
Yeah.
So for those steeping at home, just so you know, our steepers steep with us at home on every episode.
Yeah.
So this is called Sanctuary Roast. This is from Tay. It is incredible. It's an oolong tea for those steeping at home, boiling 1 to 2 minutes. Good for a second steeping, and it tastes completely different. So yeah, I think you've already tried your tea.
I took a little sip. Yeah.
How are you feeling about it?
I love it. It's mild, but it's got like
very good.
The oolong thing.
So hot.
Yeah.
So hot. You were telling me off mic about you have to tell this tea story about how you got into tea.
Well, first off, I do love tea. I'm more of a coffee snob than I am a tea snob. But there was a period of time that I got really into tea. And reason being was I was touring at the time, and we got home from touring, and the bus dropped us off at this like shopping center parking lot where we were getting picked up. And my dog had a vet appointment that morning, so my fiance was running late. I was like, there's got to be a coffee shop around here. And there's this thing that said Tea House. I was like, all right, I'm going to go there. And it was very like Asian inspired wallpaper. And I was like, okay, nobody's in here. It's just dead silent. I was like, I'm going to turn around and leave, and nobody will ever even know I was here. And as I'm exiting the door, this little Chinese lady comes out, and she's like, no. I was like, all right. She was very excited. So I was like, all right, she seems harmless. I'm going to sit down where she's pointing. So I sit down, and out from the back comes this little girl. She's just like bringing all of these different tea bags to the table and all these different like tea pots. So she starts making all these teas. And as they're brewing, I'm still just kind of sitting there in silence. And then she starts telling me in very broken English what each tea's healing property is. And they were all different. Like there were a couple different oolongs and a couple others. And she takes one for herself, and she just like slurps it down. And she's trying to make sure that I know you need to slurp it.
Yeah.
I slurped my first one down. It was really great. I was like, okay, this tea is very good. I don't know if it was the tea, but like I really started enjoying myself. I was like, this is so relaxing.
Yeah.
She said something to her daughter, and her daughter went in the back and then came out with this little like zipped up green bag, and then she just put it in front of me. And I open it up, and it's one of the tea kits that was in front of me. It was all the little saucers, and then the teapot with the steeper. And I was like, are they giving me this?
Is anyone ever giving you anything?
Not in this country.
No.
And I think that's what she was getting at. She was like, okay, I gave you this experience. You can take this one now when you buy it.
Yep.
And you can do this at home. And then she brought over all these other bags of tea as well. So she just literally rings me up, and I was like, at this point, I had all this tea. She did not charge me for that tea. The reason I never went back was because I walked out with so much loose leaf tea that I never had to go back. So I don't know if it's there. I still have bags of loose leaf oolong in my cabinet. What was weird, it was after that I got so into it because I was like, wow, I actually really like tea. I'm drinking coffee, and then I would do like a midday tea. And what I realized it did, the same reason I like pouring over my own coffee in the morning instead of using machine, is because it forces me to slow down. So I just started realizing like, wow, this is actually kind of nice that it's slowing me down for 20 minutes in the middle of the day, and then I get to enjoy the benefits of it.
Yeah.
And it was great.
It's curing cancer. Yeah. So we think.
We think.
The other thing I want listeners to know is how you and I got connected. So for those who are really dedicated listeners, you've heard the Mena episode. For those that aren't, why? Why aren't you? No. True. But for those that aren't, I was listening to Spotify Discover Weekly. We were talking about this off the mic, and I listen on low volume. If songs pull me out, they pull me out, and I'll go check them out. One of them was Mena's Dirty Dreams. I talked to her. She's incredible. We had her on the pod, and I name a few of her songs. And I'm like, these are all great. Yeah. Now, another artist also popped up. I don't think I told you this part off, Mike. Another artist also popped up in my Spotify Discover Weekly, and that was Abigail Osborne.
Nice.
And that song,
great artist.
That song was going to get over you.
Yeah, love it.
Both of those popped up, hers and Mena's, and I was like, "This is great." So I'm talking with Mena, and I bring up, I was like, "Yeah, a couple of ours have come in, you blah blah blah, Abigail Osborne," and she goes, "First off, I know her. I co-wrote a song with her."
Yeah.
And I was like, I think it was called Spaceship, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then she goes, "By the way, it seems to me that you really just like a producer that we work with." She was like, "You need to talk to Mark." Now, I don't know if you run this playlist or if someone else runs this playlist. I have a produced and written by...
Oh, yeah. That playlist is run by my management and myself.
So Mena sends me that playlist.
Oh, nice.
And I'm already just like, yeah, this is... Yeah. And it's all just bangers. And thanks, man. Yeah, it's so good. And I heard this. I was like, I've got to talk to this guy because I told you a little bit off mic. Like I used to play music. I worked with some producers, predominantly engineer, primary, secondarily producer kind of producers. I didn't have like Timbaland in the booth. Would have been nice. But like that, I feel like a music producer is a job that is so criminally misunderstood. Yeah. The function that it plays. Yeah. Because I think when you tell someone who doesn't understand music, oh, it's a music producer, they go, oh, they turn the knobs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's also changed. I don't want to say it's changed even for the worse now because there's a couple like misconceptions about what producers are nowadays because nowadays in the digital age, like producers, you can make a beat off of Splice and all these like different things that we have at our disposal now in your bedroom, and you can make something really cool. And that is producing something.
Yeah.
But back in, when Quincy Jones and David Foster and all these like guys who were producing incredible artists that like changed music.
Yeah.
And they were producing these songs. Man, they didn't even touch the equipment half the time. Yeah. They knew about it, but that's why you hire the engineer, right?
Yeah. Like Rick Rubin wasn't playing anything.
Right. And still doesn't.
Yeah.
It's about like the producer at that point, and still to this day, and this is what like, to me, this is what like a record producer is, and this is what I like to do, is like understanding the artist at their core, who they are, helping find like what that sonic branding sounds like, and then piecing together all of the right people for the project. Like you are producing the group of people, the musicians, the engineers, the background vocalists, like whatever it may be, you're putting together like a team to create a record together. For me, it's more about who is this artist? What's their story? If they don't even know what their story is, it's like, that's the songwriting part, right? It's like, what can I pull out of this artist and how can I get their story, who they are, what they want to say? How do we like package that all up in a sound as well? So like Mena's a great example. I went to a show of hers where it was just her at keyboard, and she has like these two incredible background vocalists, and they sing 3-part harmonies, and it blew my mind. It was just like in this tiny little club, and I told my manager...
God, I wish I was there for that.
It was amazing. I told my manager, I was like, just get her in the studio this week. If we got to clear stuff, like, I don't care. Get her in the studio.
Did you have preconceived ideas like, we're going to get her in and these are the things I'm going to do?
No. Literally, I was just like, you know what? Musically, I was so inspired by what she was doing. Like, a lot of the chords she was playing was like very similar to like what I like as well. Yeah. And as a producer, I'm like, I need to make sure I'm able to like understand all the musicality, whether I'm working. And if you've listened to that playlist, I'm sure you know, like, there's hip hop on there. There's R&B. There's pop.
We're gonna get to the hip hop piece side of the house. Yeah.
So for me, that's the key. Is like, what can I do to get to know this artist? Sometimes in a very quick instance, and go, yeah, I need to get you. And then how do I like translate that into the language of music? There are artists out there that deserve to be really thought out, and whether that means bringing in certain musicians, and I do that with a lot of my projects that I produce. Is I'll come out of my own pocket a lot of the time. If I really believe in this song, I will absolutely pay some of my favorite session players in Nashville to play on this record because I believe in it so much. And that's also investing in some of these artists. And then you also have projects that have recording budget as well, whether it's a label or indie, that I'm going, okay, here's the budget. Here are the players that I think are perfect for your record. And that's a record producer. That's why records out of Nashville have been so good for so long, and country records are still done that way. Pop kind of steered away from that for a little bit, but is now kind of coming back to that. There's a lot of real instrumentation and musicianship going on pop records. And that's why I liked working with Mena, because it was like a fusion of that.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a buddy who's in a band called the Shadow Boxers, and they spent some. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I have.
Yeah, they did some time in Nashville, and then they came out to LA.
Yep.
And he was telling me that like Nashville as a city understands like the inner workings of what it takes to build an artist and a sound. Their challenge, according to him, was that it was a phenomenal infrastructure that was ever so slightly tilted in the direction of country and not yet tilted enough in the direction of soulful pop music, which is what they do, which coincidentally also kind of feels like what Mena does. That town is not fully tilted in that direction.
Yeah, and I'll say this about Nashville. I don't know when that was, because it's definitely gotten better.
Probably like 8 years ago.
Yeah. So it's like the pop and the rock scene in Nashville now are unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But the one thing that is there is talent, right? Like great studios, great producers, great songwriters. And I know a lot of, LA writers are going to Nashville a lot now, not to try and get country cuts, but to write with some of these great writers.
Jamie Liddell, I think, is right around there, yeah.
And that's why, like, for me, I lived out here as well for a little bit, but I lived in Nashville before I lived in LA. And I always say this to people I work with. I say, if you do Nashville before LA, you always end up going back to Nashville because you realize what you have there. For me, my years literally split. I do LA every 2 months, and I've been doing that now for a couple years, and it's been incredible. I've gotten my time's way more respected now out here. We get to pick and choose because I'm only out here for a certain amount of time, who we're working with. So it's just way more targeted, and it's been way more beneficial to do it that way. Plus, like 2 to 3 weeks of LA at a time is more than enough LA.
Listen, I love LA. So I want to be clear. Like, I do love it here, but like I completely.
I'm not shitting on it, by the way.
No, I don't think you are. I don't think you are.
Because I do love it out here. I just, after 2 to 3 weeks, it's exhausting. It's just exhausting.
So it's interesting. I think that a lot of people who live here don't understand that they're doing something similar to you without knowing it. So for example, I live here full time. After 2 to 3 weeks of doing nonstop stand-up, I absolutely hermit back here.
Yeah.
I don't really leave my house all that much for, 3, 4, 5 days.
Yep.
Like, I hate to say this because I think this was something I was fighting against in my very early 20s. But yeah, I am the person now who's like, cool, I've got a fiance, 2 cats, and a television. Like, kind of all good to go here.
And that's what's actually nice about these trips. And I actually, Shannon will come out to LA with me every once in a while, and
which is lovely.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Jess
but
comes on tour with me sometimes.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's nice because we get to do things out here that I definitely, like, I don't do them when I'm out here on my own. I'm like, when I come out here now, it is so funny. I come out here and, like, even this trip, for instance, it's Saturday.
Yep.
And I'm doing a podcast. You know what I mean? Like, I spent all morning working on other tracks that I'm working on. I'm out here writing, and when I come out here, I'm typically writing with artists out here for specific projects every day, or I'm finishing up records out here. And that's literally what's happening this week. And then, like, tomorrow's Easter, I'll be at my hotel, Uber Eating, and working on tracks.
Which, what a day.
Yeah. But when I go home to Nashville, it's that same thing. It's like, I can't wait to get home and just relax, go on a hike, and it'll just be Shannon, our dog, Sequoia, and we chill. And I love that. And what's nice about doing the trips every 2 months is it's like, it gets you out of I'm out of my studio environment. I love my studio. I've built my studio. I do full records out of it, and it's amazing, but it's nice to be in a new environment.
What I tell people in comedy, and I think this applies to music as well, but, tell me if I'm off base here, is like, in comedy, if you are doing, you are like a car, and you are using your gas. Yep. You need to have experience and change and difference that comes in, and that's going to be the gas that fills the tank. Yep. If you're just burning it down, no use.
Yeah, I get it for sure, because I would say in like 2018 to 2021, I was like, that's when like I was getting a good amount of songwriting cuts, and things were like production-wise was getting really busy, and like from a business perspective, you're like, yep, let's go. So I was going nonstop, and I was like I was saying no to nothing, and I was producing as much as I possibly could, and like writing every day of the week while also producing records. And I got so creatively drained that I started getting angry at myself, because I was like, I was writing so much that I felt like I was just like regurgitating things. And again, my focus is like trying to pull things from the artist and get to know them. And I was trying to get to know so many different personalities and artists that it just drained me. And I started realizing that the songs that were coming out of the studio just were, and I wasn't okay with that. So when I started to slow down, it really helped. And that's why I think I started doing the LA every 2 months in like 2021. And just consistently doing that, and it's great.
Yeah, the challenging thing about music, and I think this has come out a lot in the lawsuits you've seen over the past like 5 to 10 years, people tend to forget that, like, no matter how many years pass, magically more notes do not appear in the now. Granted, right now we're in a very, we're not doing a crazy 12 tone, well, they exist, but we're not we're not contemporarily using them. Like, you're stuck. So people would be like, well, they used a D minor to a G to an A. That's what we used. I'm like, oh, you really? Everyone uses that.
Right. That's why, like, I get so frustrated when I do write like a really cool song, and one of the first comments is, because this is the last thing I want to hear as a producer or songwriter, is kind of sounds like so-and-so. And I'm like, well, then we failed. Yeah. But what's interesting is every once in a while, and that, I don't want to say I'm like super picky, but we've gotten to be a little bit picky more recently about what artists I'm working with. And if I'm not inspired by that artist's story or their sound or what they're doing, I typically won't do it, because I won't lend anything to the project if I feel that way. So, for instance, I just finished a record that I'm really stoked about. It's kind of under wraps.
Okay. I'm not gonna,
for the time being.
I'm not gonna push.
I mean, I can tell you who it is, because I I will promote her all day, every day. But her name is Rose Betts.
Okay. It's a good name. I don't know this person.
She is an Irish artist.
Already like her.
She lives here in LA. And it's funny because
Listen, I'll have every artist you work with on the pod. We'll just do that.
She's incredible. And the way that it happened, and this is what's cool about just when the music and the creativity steers the way. We were just like, my management met her management, and they set up like a writing session while I was on my next trip out here.
Great.
So I was like, all right, yeah, I know nothing about this artist, but usually I don't. But if my manager believes in it, I'll believe in it. She knows me so well that it should make sense. So I go in and I meet Rose. She's like the sweetest person on the planet. And she essentially starts showing me her stuff and what her vision is. And they've had a really, really hard time out here with producers to try and figure out what the secret is to like getting her project to sit right, because it's Irish Celtic pop.
It's proper Celtic pop.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
She's got a song right now that's doing really well, and it's kind of the start of it, called Irish Eyes. It kind of blew up on TikTok.
Okay.
And that
Good
was the
place
start
to
of
do
all
that.
Yeah. And she started playing me all these like songs that she had like 3/4 done, if not all the way done, and they were just kind of like rough work tape, like voice memo kind of things, and little productions that she put together. And her manager was a producer as well, and is. So he even was like, when I showed up, he was like, nobody really gets this whole thing, so good luck. And actually, he's also from New York, so I was like, yep. I was like, man, I love this guy. He's just kind of shooting it to me straight.
Yeah.
And we ended up working on a song that day called Doodles, and it's straight up an Irish pub drinking song. And we finished it that day.
Oh my gosh.
And what's fun about out here, I leave like a few pieces of gear with my manager so that I know I've got some stuff out here. But nobody ever has, and I work out of different studios, and none of these studios ever have guitars in them. So I have a Fender Acoustasonic that they sent me, and that's their guitar that's like half acoustic, half electric.
I know it, yeah.
And
wow.
Practically kind of a weird guitar.
You don't see them often.
No, and I think they've had a hard time selling them. I actually really do love it. It's just it's hard to find a use for it. But like, this needs a guitar progression.
Yeah.
So I mic'd up the Acoustasonic with a really nice Blue Bottle mic that was at the studio, and the guitar sounds like trash, but it's perfect for this song, because the vibe of this song is it should be sung at an Irish pub. And we finished it. We were like, we did gang stomps. I used a tea shaker, like a tea bag, or he had like a jar of tea. I can't remember what it was. I named it tea bag, and I used that as a shaker on the record. And then we did like gang vocals, and we came out with this killer day one demo that sounded like an Irish drinking song, and it got everybody so excited that her manager, which I love managers that are proactive about this stuff, he goes, we're sending her to Nashville. You're going to do the full record. And I was like, bring it on. She was in Nashville 3 weeks later, and we demoed out 6 more songs. She was back the next month. We demoed out another 6 songs. And we've been working on that record now for 4 months, and it just finished this week. It's all going off to mix right now. And
this is insane. What a great story.
Yeah. And I, again, brought in some of my favorite musicians on it. I did not know that I was going to love the Celtic thing so much.
How could you?
But it came naturally. So when that song comes out, probably in a couple of months, the first single that we did together, which is a beautiful song, I think comes out next month. But the whole record is getting mixed right now, and it's 11 songs, I believe.
That is insane. I have 1,000 more questions. I know we need to get to our first segment. So the first segment is called the Newly Friend Game. It is like the Newlywed Game, but we're friends. You have a dry erase board right there. Yeah. You can grab your marker. So the way this works, I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to write down your answer. Don't say it out loud. I'm going to write down my answer that I think you're going to say, and we'll see if we get it right. And then we'll do the same question for me. This is going to be really hard, because if you worked in one genre, this would be a much easier question. But you don't, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Great.
So write this down. Don't say it out loud. Who do you find to be your most influential producer of all time? 1, 2, 3. Philip. David Foster. I said Niles Rodgers, and I also said Quincy.
Yeah. I would say Quincy right after David. In fact, I just watched the documentary on
We Are the World
last night.
Yeah.
And it really was kind of cool to see Quincy in his like producer prime and just seeing how he functions, because he is a record producer.
Yeah.
Right? And seeing that like inspired me. David, he's got a documentary on Netflix as well, and I really highly recommend it. It's called like Off the Record or Behind the Record or something. What's cool about David, and this is what inspires me about him, is you don't realize how many brilliant artists and songs he was behind.
Is there one song that like I would be shocked that he produced?
Like the biggest hits from Chicago, it's all The Secret was David Foster, and you start to realize that.
Huh. I never think
Celine
about
Dion.
with bands like that. I never think with artists like that even. It doesn't occur to me to think about, because it's funny, I do associate Michael Jackson a lot with Quincy.
Yeah.
You know, I took a one-on-one kind of intensive when I was in my senior year of college. I absolutely loved the lead guitarist at the music school. He was brilliant. He recorded with a jazz trio in, I think it was Italy, every summer. I mean, the guy was a legend, an incredible player. And he was like, you write songs. You're in a band. You released an album. I was like, yeah. I thought I was about to get in trouble. I'm like, nah. And he's like, do you want to do a songwriting workshop? Just you and me. Cool. And I was like, sold.
Yeah.
The first assignment he gave me was, I want you to pick 10 songs that you wish you'd written and bring them in, and we're going to figure out why you felt that way. So, I mean, the 10 songs, I mean, there was like Signed, Sealed, Delivered was on there. Nice. Ain't Too Proud to Beg was on there. You can start seeing my musical taste a little bit here. Yep. But one of the ones on there was Workin' Day and Night, which was maybe a weird one to choose for Michael, but that's what I chose. Yeah. And he sees that one. He goes, we're going to start here. And I was like, why is that? And he goes, do you understand why you like it? Yeah. And I was like, because it's amazing. And he goes, sure, let me explain. Yeah. And he starts pointing out, I was a musician, and I still didn't even know the counter melodies and counter rhythms that were hiding all over that song. Yep. And I was just like, holy hell. Yep. And I was like, this has got to be Quincy, right? He's like, Quincy Jones, if you listen to all of his tracks, he pays attention to this. Yep. And it's just like, this guy's amazing.
And that, again, back to one of your original, questions and what we talked about, but that is a record producer. Yeah. Right? Like, you're finding the artist thing, and that I think is what is inspiring about Quincy and David Foster. You don't know they're behind it if you really don't do the deep dive thing. Yeah. And that inspires me. I love not being in the spotlight. I hate talking about myself. I hate going to events where, like, music industry events, entertainment industry events, like, you got to go and you got to talk about yourself. And my manager's great at that, so I let her do that. And
you got to subtly brag.
I absolutely loathe it. And that's why, even if you've seen my social media, one of the ways that I promote songs is I used to do like an into the track like breakdown, which I know a lot of people are doing now.
Yeah, but I love them.
I do too. But I had a hard time talking about why I chose to do that on the track. So if you've noticed, it kind of turned into like a podcast, which is funny because I, no offense, dislike podcasts. Like,
no offense taken. So do I.
I don't typically listen to podcasts. They're not my thing. Shannon loves podcasts.
Is
but
Shannon
they're all
a
about
steeper?
like
murder. I don't know. Does she listen to us? Probably not.
You got to, unless you talk about murder. She does like.
We can try.
My videographer, Andy, had an idea where he was like, why don't you bring the artists in? He was like really into podcasts all of a sudden. So he like manipulated me into a podcast. So we actually call it This Is Not a Podcast.
Which is a great name for a podcast.
Yeah. And it allows me to help promote the song and talk about some of the moments that we had in the studio and still break down my production ideas while being able to talk about it with the artist I did it for or with. And that to me has been so much easier because I like being able to talk about the artist and why we did that. And that is what is inspiring about Quincy and David Foster is when you start to realize the songs that they're behind, you realize like they're the secret sauce in all of these artists. And they were the ones that were able to like craft that artist sound. And that's what I like to be. I love being that.
I mean, you're clearly doing it because I'm listening to your artist before I even knew who you were. So good sign.
Yeah.
Here, let's do the same question for me. I'm going to narrow it down a little bit to make this easier for you. I still think it'll be tough. Who is my favorite hip hop producer? Okay, so don't say it out loud. Write it down. Okay. I'm going to be honest. Whatever you write, I'm probably going to like that. So 1, 2, 3, flip. You said Timbaland. Yeah, I said Neptunes, Ninth Wonder, No ID, and Ludwig Göransson.
Love Ludwig.
Okay, so one of my favorite artists of all time is Childish Gambino.
Yeah.
Love, love, love. Can't get enough.
Yep.
One of the best experiences of my life. Have you ever heard of Pharos? And you can put the board down. We're all good. So what he did is he essentially built a small town in Joshua Tree, a temporary town.
Okay.
Where he had like light and water installations. He put together an amphitheater where when you walked in, it was an inflatable dome. And you walk in and they, put your phones in those little cases so you can't record anything, whatever. Yeah. And I'm expecting all the Gambino that I love. I'd never heard of any of this stuff, but it was the most euphoric experience I've ever had. Like there were animations all over the inside of the dome and everything.
That's dope.
And he plays a set that it took me to another world, took me to another stratosphere and things I'd never heard before. And it sounded a lot like kind of like Bootsy Collins kind of stuff. So anyway, that happens. I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. And it's revealed maybe 2 months later that he's going to be releasing an album that he played in full at Pharos, which was Awaken My Love. And that album, which I'm assuming you've heard, like blew me away, split my whole being in half.
Yeah.
And so I give a lot of credit to Ludwig because he was the beginning. He wrote all the stuff with Donald.
Yep.
And now he's winning Emmys and Oscars.
So he's super inspiring to me now, partly because I'm also, within the past couple of years, I've landed in the film trailer world totally by accident.
Saw that, have so many questions.
Yeah. Essentially just did like a couple sync camps and then got reached out to afterwards by a couple of
what is
film
a sync camp?
Every once in a while, publishers will have like a camp where they bring a bunch of producers and songwriters together and you literally just write for film and TV. And people started to notice everything that I was like inspired by and doing at these sync camps was very cinematic and like very film trailer-esque.
Like John Williams-y or like...
Ish, yeah, a little bit of that. And then even just like really kind of intense cinematic orchestral kind of stuff.
Zimmer.
And I didn't even, I didn't even know I liked that stuff. I did know that I loved like Zimmer and the Inception soundtrack and Interstellar and
love Inception.
So inspired by those things, but
and
I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But I started like investing in different string libraries and it came naturally, kind of like the Irish Celtic thing. It just was like, this is going to be something you do and you're going to figure it out really quickly. And I just kind of learned it. And so as I was doing these sync camps, all of the stuff that was coming out of them was very cinematic and film trailer-y. And I got reached out to by a couple of the like supervisors that were at these camps because every once in a while they'll bring film supervisors in to like kind of help steer and talk about some certain briefs that they have currently for films. And like I had 3 different supervisors reach out like over Instagram after a couple of these different camps. And all of them were like, man, your stuff's really great for trailers. Have you ever done anything like that? And I was like, I did one like random thing for Nat Geo a couple of years ago that was like
cool.
Random. And I was like, but I'd love to try. And they just started sending me like straight up things to like shoot for, which is a really hard world to get into. I started learning out here. Like a buddy of mine works in the Hans Zimmer camp and he's like, do you have any idea how hard it is to actually land trailers? And you landed like a major motion picture trailer in like your first 3 months of trying it. I was like, no, is that hard? He's like, guys literally spend their whole year out here trying to like do that. And they're lucky if they land one. Some guys won't land them for 10 years.
Not only that though, but like I never understood the Hans Zimmer thing, and I learned about it kind of recently, that like he incubates the younger folks, but then he also gives them credit. Yeah. Like someone was like, oh, but like he's stealing their work. It's like,
I've heard kind of mixed reviews on the whole thing. I mean, when you're at a point too where it's like everybody wants you, it is kind of like you need more people and workers to get it done. But Ludwig he's the new Hans. He is 100%. And I guess that's why I'm so inspired by him now is he reminds me of like he was a record producer first and now he's just crushing. And like again, I think why Ludwig is so good is simply because he is that record producer we were talking about, that what I like to be, which is he's pulling artists like deepest, darkest things from their core and going, let's figure out what this sounds like and looks like, and let's experiment with things. And he's doing that same thing in the scoring world.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so good. And it's just, it's inspiring.
Listen, you have a very good problem. Okay, like you're good at a lot of things. It's a good problem to have.
Sure, yeah.
But like you're also doing like let's look at some of the artists we just talked about, right? It was Rose Betts, was that the name? Mm-hmm. Yeah, shout out Rose. Rose Betts, right? So that's kind of like straight ahead Celtic pop. Yep. Then you've got like the Menas and the Abigails, which are a little more like kind of pop with some soul in the mix there. Yep. More Mena than Abigail feels a little more straight ahead pop. Yeah, indie pop. You got that stuff going. You also do a lot of hip hop, which I want to get to because I love hip hop. So you've also got that stuff going.
Yeah.
Then you're also working on cinematic movie trailer scores. Yeah. So it's kind of like, is there mental fatigue, or is it almost more of a self-generating, refreshing thing?
Yeah. There was a time, because outside of even production and songwriting and doing all the things you just mentioned, there was a time where before I was like really able to do writing and production full time.
Yeah.
I was also touring as a musician and a tour manager. And that was something I was told all the time was like,
oh my gosh,
you do it all. And I was told many times, like, you need to pick one. And at the time, I like kind of just rejected that. I was like,
I'm glad you did.
No, if I can do all this, I'm going to do it. And it was the best thing I could have done. Now I've had to like focus a little bit and go, all right, now the primary, income and what makes me my living is this songwriting and production. That is your specialty. But I am the producer I am today because of the touring that I did and saw how crowds interacted with songs. And just all of that, like the business experience I got from it helps me run my production company and all of that. So back then I would have said, yes, I probably was doing way too much, but it probably drained a lot of things from me.
Sure.
Now I don't typically feel too much like creative loss from doing all the different genres and whatnot. It does refresh me. And that's why I like the film trailer thing. The deadlines on those are nuts. Like
fast turnaround?
48 hours. You got to start from scratch and we need a full on trailer.
48
hours is the longest I've ever gotten. And that's forced me in record production to be even less precious about things and go, look, if it sounds good, I don't care if it's right or wrong. I don't care if it was engineered perfectly. Yeah. I don't care if it's a Fender Acoustasonic mic'd up that shouldn't be mic'd up. But if it sounds good, use it. And it's made me a better producer that way.
Wow. I'm just really impressed with that. I think that like sometimes, I always get this criticism from my fiance who's just like, your problem is you're good at everything and sometimes you can't do it all.
Yeah.
And I was like, in their world, is there a world where I can? And she's like at a certain point, like you've got to, she doesn't say pick a lane. Yeah. She said, if you're going to take something on, give that the time that it deserves.
Yeah. I also think there's a way to figure out how to make it this is the like key. If you can figure out a way to make it work together and like how one fuels the other. And that was like, for me, touring before songwriting and production was, able to be really full time. Touring and tour managing and doing all of this stuff, I was able to do more in that space and go charge more because I'm doing tour management and I'm your music director and I'm your guitarist or keys player, whatever it was. And then all of that money I invested into my studio. So all of the equipment I have and the way that I've been able to build my studio and invest into string libraries for trailers, like I wouldn't have it if I didn't do this other thing. So I found out how to like let one thing fuel the other. If
I was doing them all, I would have been like, as your tour manager, your guitarist, who's also me, is asking for more money.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do about that. Yeah. But this is as good a time as any to move to the lightning round. Are you ready for it?
Let's do it.
All All right. So the lightning round is 5 fast questions. They do not at all. Oh, you don't need the board.
Oh, good.
You can hang.
I thought you were reaching for a paper.
I was reaching for my card. Here's the thing. I know these questions, but I use this because it makes me feel like a talk show host.
Okay.
You know,
cool.
I feel like it's good.
Yeah.
You know, I got my little taps. If I had a bunch of them, I'd just throw them.
Great. Yeah.
I can't remember who it was. I think it was like Rosie O'Donnell who used to just like throw pencils and stuff and like koosh balls.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'd like to do that.
Yeah.
But anyway,
These
are
a shtick.
Yeah, it's my shtick. 5 fast questions. Not at all have to be fast answers. Last 5 that we end every episode with.
Gotcha.
Question 1. What is a favorite ritual of yours? So, for example, I love brewing tea in the morning.
I mean, I'm going to have to say brewing coffee in the morning. That is my thing. It starts my day off right. I actually go to bed at night excited to make coffee in the morning. Sometimes I go to bed early just so I can wake up for the coffee. I get so amped about coffee.
How many hours of sleep are you getting a night?
I actually get good sleep. I don't get good deep sleep.
Yeah, we talked about that off mic.
I get hours of the right amount of hours. I get about 8 hours of sleep typically.
Oh, bless you.
That's happened within the past couple of years. Like I've disciplined myself enough to, if I can, shut down at 5-6 p.m. when Shannon gets home from her job so we can actually have dinner, watch a show, and then, I hit the bed and I fall asleep because creatively, like, it does exhaust me with how much I do creatively during the day.
Sure.
And Shannon actually realizes it the hard way because she'll come home and want to talk. And for whatever reason, like, creatively, when I get drained, talking feels so laborsome.
Sometimes I feel the same way. I'm just like, but I realize it's like just trying to be there. Is what I try to do, and show that I actually care. Sometimes deceptively, it looks like I don't care about what she's saying when I'm tired, but I actually really do care a lot about what she says, especially when she does funny bits when she's complaining. It's great. Speaking of that, actually, that leads to our second question. What is a running bit you have with a friend or partner that makes you laugh?
I think the reason I want to say this one is because I probably never missed it. I grew up, and our Thanksgiving tradition in my house was we would watch Christmas Vacation at the end of
Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
okay.
Because it was the
kind
start of the Christmas.
Exactly. Good
so,
movie, by the way.
Yeah, so good, and there's so many great quotes from it.
Yeah.
So I have a couple buddies that also did the same thing and watched it all the time. So my buddy TJ and I, and he's a drummer that I have play on a ton of the records that I produce. We have not missed a Thanksgiving where we have quoted Christmas Vacation.
No.
Not missed it.
That's amazing.
And it's so funny too, because it'll like, we don't even know, like, we'll be in different cities at Thanksgiving and we'll almost always do it right at the same time too. And then we finish the quote.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's the perfect answer.
Oh, yeah.
Now, question 3 is a harder question. Question 3, what is a very controversial opinion that you have?
Since I know you're from New York.
Uh-oh.
And I am from New Jersey.
Okay.
I think that the bagels and pizza are better in New Jersey than New York. Absolutely, 100% know that for sure. So I feel like that's a good one for you.
You're riling me up. I'm resisting.
I'd love to have a tasting. I think we pull the best pizza from New York and best bagel from your favorite spot.
Okay.
And my favorite pizza and my favorite bagel from my spot in New Jersey. And then we just really...
Listen, I'm down for that.
And then we do the blind test.
Here's my question for you.
Yeah.
Are you going to come into my house and bring me Grimaldi's? Like, is that what you're going to claim?
No.
Is that what you're gonna You're gonna
no.
Oh, it's in Hoboken.
No. I'm talking like we're talking little towns in New Jersey.
Okay.
With real own pizza shops.
Like the proper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I think it's fair to say that if we were to do a blind test of these, we'd have a fair agreement that New Jersey's bagels and pizza are better.
I thought you were going to have a fair fight. I'd say, sure, it might be a fair fight, but you wouldn't win it. Question 4, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? And if so, is there one moment that really sticks with you?
Recently, I did a couple film trailers, kind of like squeezing them into my schedule and just like knocking them out in 24 to 48 hours. And they've given me like a very specific direction, whether it's like a cover of a song and they want it like trailerized and more cinematic. And I've done a couple of those and they haven't landed, but then I've seen the trailer with that same cover that somebody else did. And it's so similar that you're like, what did I miss? And you just start to realize like it doesn't matter. Like, there's so many other hands at play. Like, it probably came from a completely different trailer house. And even if it came from the same supervisor, like, they just like that one better.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But those are definitely the moments where I'm like, I mean, I feel like I crushed it.
Yeah, you're like, am I a fraud?
Right.
What's happening?
But then I remember, like, the people that told me, you landed 2 major trailers in your first year of doing trailer work, so just keep doing.
Probably feel good at where you're at.
Yeah.
Final question 5. What is your favorite tea? And if you don't have a favorite tea, though I'm sure you do, what is your favorite comfort?
I will say my favorite tea is an Oolong tea.
Maybe this one. We don't know.
I really did like it, actually.
Yeah.
I would love another cup after this.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say, Oolong tea. I actually just got into, because I had like the OG COVID. Yeah. Before vaccines.
So did I.
Yeah. Did you lose your sense of smell?
Yes.
We're starting to learn. We're very similar.
Yeah.
How long did you lose your smell for?
Oh, it was a minute. It was probably about a week. Not long.
Year and a half.
No way.
No smell, no taste. It messed with my mental health. I didn't realize how important my scent was. I'm a foodie and obviously love coffee, and it wrecked me, dude. I had no sense of smell for about a year and a half, and it was so depressing.
And it's fully back now.
It is fully back now. Things were a little weird at first. It took a while to like balance out.
Some of my stuff smelled different.
Yeah, I say things are back to normal. I also, it could just be my brain like adjusted and goes, this is what it smells like now.
Yeah.
There's some weird things that it's like my brain was like, we don't need to smell this. We're going to cross this, like dog poop. I can't smell dog poop anymore.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Because of COVID, I don't know if you have any sort of like long COVID, post-COVID things, but like my lungs definitely aren't the same, right? Like they just feel a little more fatigued.
Yep.
And I never had like a really like awful cough, but I definitely had like gunk and congestion and still do every once in a while. So I ended up getting into like a better lungs kind of tea, and it's loose leaf. It's in like a bag, but it's at least loose leaf, not like a bag with a thing. It's like those like fancier bags. So that's been kind of one of my new comfort teas at night, because I'll only do coffee in the morning. As much as I love coffee, I'm not like I drink 3 cups a day. I drink one great cup of coffee that I look forward to every morning. But now every once in a while, like I've realized how nice tea is, especially for before bed if it doesn't have caffeine. And this Better Lungs is very it's like thyme and rosemary, so it tastes like, it's not the greatest taste, because it tastes like what spices that you would put on food.
Yeah, you're like drinking a Thanksgiving turkey.
Yeah, that's kind of what it tastes like. But I drink it, and there's just something nice about the warmth, and it like helps put me to bed.
I love that.
So that's my like new comfort thing.
Yeah.
And I blame OG COVID for it.
As well you should.
Yeah.
That's the pod. How do you feel?
Great.
Good.
I had a blast.
Thank you for coming. And, let us know as you continue to release music. We'll have you back.
Absolutely.
That was Mark Siegel. You can find him on Instagram at Mark Siegel and on TikTok at official Mark Siegel. We've also included a link in our show notes to a playlist of songs he's produced. This episode was produced by Dylan Rosenthal. It was edited by Martin Alvarez. Our theme song and additional music are by Oliver Hymack. Our cover art was done by Neil Fraser with photography by Matt Mazisco. Social media by Dia Villegas. Please write a review and rate our podcast on Apple Podcasts and wherever else you can. You can send any questions, comments, newly friend game suggestions, or tea suggestions to steepcombos@gmail.com or tweet us at steepcombos. I'm Josh Lanzette, and you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at Josh Lanzette. We'll be back next week, so until then, happy steeping.
What is this going to cost me at the end?
I didn't even think about that.
Because I'm like, I didn't ask for anything. So she's just making all these teas, and I was like,
$4,000.
Yeah. You never know.
You don't
know.
She's
telling me these teas like heal cancer. I was like, do I need to give you my health insurance card? Like,
do I need to sell you my home?